What's happening, guys? My name is One Zendarius, and I'm back with more 101 in Warframe. This time we're going to talk about the stats in this game. And if you guys do enjoy my videos, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for any and all updates. Also, be sure to join my Guilded server, as all information mentioned here can be found there as well. Now, with all that being done, let's get into it. Let's face it, this is a numbers game, and you can't deal tons of damage if you don't know how to deal it. Because of that, knowing which each stat does will help you understand how to melt each type of health bar. For starters, let's talk about the weapons themselves. Each weapon is created equal for every player, as one weapon stats are the same as another player's weapon stats. What makes a weapon unique is what each player mods the weapon with. One player may have heat damage on a weapon, while another may have toxin on the same weapon. The factions in the game also play a role, since one weapon will be nuking one faction and barely do anything to another. There are several stats that affect how a weapon behaves. They are accuracy, determines how accurate your shots are. The higher the stat is, the more precise your shots from your crosshair are. Riven disposition, determines how effective a Riven mod is for the weapon. The more orbs you have, the bigger the bonus of the Riven you have, and the least you have, the more detrimental it is. Side note, this changes with time, so it may be great now, but down the road it may lose some effectiveness. This usually favors the least used weapons, as there is only one Riven to a weapon, no more, no less. Fire rate determines how many rounds per second the weapon fires. The higher this stat is, the more bullets you can kick out. Noise level, this determines how loud the weapon is when it fires. There are two levels to this, and this can be modded as well. They are alarming and silent. Alarming is when enemies can hear you from far away, and silent is pretty much guarantees that you won't get noticed unless an enemy sees the dead body or you are in range. Magazine size, this determines the starting magazine capacity, which can be altered with mods. Max ammo, determines how much extra ammo you can hold of the weapon itself. Reload time, determines how long it takes to reload the weapon. The lower the stat is, the faster you reload the weapon, and the higher the stat is, the longer it takes. Trigger type, this lets you know the type of trigger the weapon has. And the triggers are also divided up into different types as well, which is automatic. Fires automatically until you let go of the trigger, pretty standard. Semi-autos, fires as fast as you can pull the trigger. Scout rifles and various sniper rifles come to mind with this. Burst, fires a set rounds per pull. It could be anywhere between 4 or 3 rounds per pull of the trigger. Duplex, now this is kind of complicated, so I'll explain it as best as I can. Fires a round with a pull of the trigger and a second when you let go of it. In short, when you pull the trigger, keep it held down, then release to fire the second shot. The best weapons that have this trigger is the Tigress and the Zylok. Held, it's similar to auto, but in a beam form. It fires a beam of energy continuously until you let go or the clip is empty. Charge, now this is a bit of a unique trigger type. Builds power when the trigger is held down. Some weapons will fire automatically when the circle fills around the crosshair, while some will maintain charge until you let go of the fire button. Most bows come into this category. Others won't fire it at all until the circle is full. Great example of this is the Daikyu bow. There are more stats, but they are not seen as the base stats such as punch through and multi-shot. Shotguns are special in that they fire several pellets at once and fall under the multi-shot category. I'll explain that later. Yeah, it's a lot of information, but study these weapon stats to understand what each weapon does and how you should use it. Most, if not all of these can be modded, except disposition, which changes every prime cycle. Now you know about the base weapon stats. Next we are going to get into the damage portion. This is the bread and butter of where your hundreds of thousands or millions of damage come from. One thing to note is that every time the weapon ranks or levels up, its stats go up as well. I'm not too sure about how, but any weapon is capable of being OP even in the beginning of the game. The exception to this rule is the MK1 weapons, as they are the inferior variant of the actual weapon. For example, the MK1 bow is the weaker variant of the actual standard bow weapon. Anyway, on to the damage. Total damage. This is the total damage of all damage types combined, not the total damage you deal per shot as you may think. Many new players confuse this. Critical chance. This tells you how often you see those yellow, orange, and red, in that order, damage numbers. The higher the stat, the more often your shots will deal increased damage, and the more often you will see those damage numbers. Critical multiplier. This goes hand in hand with critical chance. The higher this stat is, the more damage your critical hits deal. Key to dealing millions in damage per shot. Multi-shot, as explained before. This lets you know how many bullets you fire from a single shot of the gun. The higher this stat is, the more bullets you fire from one pull of the trigger. Shotguns fall into this category, but other guns can benefit from this as well. Status chance. This is the opposite of critical chance. This determines how often you proc status types. I'll explain this a bit later. The higher this stat, the more often you deal status effect damage, and when it reaches 100%, you'll deal more than one type of status damage per shot. Meaning if a weapon has impact and slash, 100% status chance will let you deal both damage types at once. I won't go into melee weapons since that is a whole thing all by itself. But do know that it does have the same properties as guns. However, they have more stats unique to them as a whole. That's all for now. If you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to leave a comment down below. Until then, I'll catch you guys later.